Okay, so what the plan is here for this video is I'm going to be going onto Twitter. I'm going to be looking at a few tweets made by people highlighting what other NHL insiders have had to say on the media the past few days, and we're just going to be reading them. I don't really like making videos like these because they're really simple to do. It doesn't take a genius to compile a whole bunch of Twitter threads and read them together in one video, but this is kind of the most accurate way to portray what has been said in the NHL mediascape the last few days, and I believe this is a really big topic. So let's go over the Vancouver Canucks and the trade rumors, all the stuff going on with Miller and Brock Boeser in particular, because these two guys are the ones that headline this conversation. Now, the reason we're talking about this is because a few days ago we had ourselves Frank Seravalli, who made himself an appearance on Sportsnet 650, talking about the Vancouver Canucks and a few updates they had. Now, I couldn't actually find the link to the radio hit itself. They usually post these on the website. I found an earlier one from a week ago, but not necessarily the one that was highlighted that people are talking about when it comes to the Canucks. Frank Seravalli on Sportsnet 650, though, went ahead and said that the Canucks are looking to move Besser at the trade deadline. The plan might be to keep Miller over him and Garland. Now, firstly, this is not a brand new idea. The Vancouver Canucks really liking JT Miller and dubbing him as a more necessary keep for the team rather than Besser and Garland. We've seen a lot of speculation popping up about Garland and Besser. Besser specifically because he's a guy that expires this offseason. Because he's going out there with a $7.5 million qualifying offer on his contract, it makes things a little bit difficult when you ask yourself, okay, how much is Besser really going to be making next year? He's making 5.8 right now, and he hasn't really progressed all too much throughout the past few years, point production-wise. In 2019-20, which was the first year of this contract, he had 45 points, 57 games. Last year, he had himself 49 points in 56 games, so a little bit better of a point-per-game number, but this season he has declined somewhat. Now, a lot of that could be chalked up to Travis Green. The whole Bruce Boudreau thing has revived Brock Boeser. In fact, if you take a look at his recent game log, 8 points in the last 10 games and 5 points in the last 5. So, a lot better over Bruce Boudreau. But when you take a look at a full sample size of what a player has done over a season, you still look at the numbers and you say, okay, he's on pace for 49 points in 76 games. He had 49 points in 20 fewer games last year. Where do we evaluate this guy? Does he deserve a pay raise? Does he not? Whatever, right? Because his contract is also expiring, that adds another layer of insecurity there. For JT Miller, at the very least, you have yourselves the next year's worth of play. And for Miller, being as good as he has been the most consistent Canucks forward by far. He is one of the top players in the entire NHL when it comes to points. So this is a player that, for all intents and purposes, is better than Besser today. He is likely going to be better than Besser next year, and probably the year after that too. Who really knows when Besser gets his mojo back, and when Besser fulfills that ceiling that he does have, whether that's in 3, 4, 5 years from now. Miller is a little bit older, so there is a lot less of a potential timeline into the long-term future for him to be as good as he is today. He is in his prime now. So, because the Vancouver Canucks are in a position where they feel like they don't need to trade JT, by the way, we have another video talking about Miller in a few hours from now. I want to talk about him again because, yeah, there was a comparison that Kevin Bieksa made on the recent Hockey Night in Canada broadcast that I thought was really great, and so I wanted to bring a commentary about that. But when you figure out what's going on with Miller, you can understand why the Canucks would want to keep him. For Brock, you could definitely say that his ceiling aligns with a lot of the ceilings of the other guys on the team, Pettersson, Hughes, Demko, etc. And because Miller is in his prime today, you could argue, okay, I'd rather have Besser than Miller. I'd rather trade Miller because Besser will be at his peak when this team is actually contending, and for Miller, he's at his peak now when the Canucks are still a tweener team that can barely make the wild card. So pick your poison there, Vancouver. Either way, though, word has come out that apparently Brock Boeser is the guy the Canucks would want to trade more, and we had ourselves another quote saying this from Seravalli: the Canucks make a move, it's Besser who is likely the guy. He's the guy with the target. He said this on the Daily Faceoff rundown earlier today, that he thinks there's a 50-50 chance that Brock Boeser gets traded, although it's not clear if Vancouver will do it at the deadline or in the offseason. Now, 50-50, I'll just go out there and say this right here. If you were a casino game, 50-50 would give you the best odds. That's plain and simple. Those are some pretty high odds if you ask me, and yes, I did quote the movie 50-50. It's my favorite movie of all time. It was shot here in Vancouver and around my neighborhood, so I very much do like that, but all movie references aside, that appears to be the case. You also had yourselves Rick Dhaliwal, who said a few days ago on Donnie and Dolly, you're hearing more and more noise that Besser could be the guy moved instead. We'll see where the club is with Besser and how that situation goes, but again, they are committed to using the time they have, and it's very early in the process with Brock Boeser, so there still are like 2 weeks left until the trade deadline, so we'll see where things go in that respect. But the lack of extension talks so close to the deadline, however, certainly seems to speak volumes. This was from the Drance and Dhaliwal article published on The Athletic. And also we had ourselves one more quote from Rick Dhaliwal that sparked up this entire video here. I did hear that the Pittsburgh Penguins could have interest in Brock Boeser. Now that's a small comment. It's not one that has too much depth behind it, but if you really wanted to try to pry into the workings of what a Pittsburgh Penguins Brock Boeser trade could look like, things get really interesting. Now, Taj on the tweet said, okay, the long rumor Besser for Kapanen plus deal? Who knows? And that seems to be the guy that a lot of Canucks fans start to think about immediately when they think, okay, who could the Vancouver Canucks acquire from the Pittsburgh Penguins? Oh, they need speed, right? Kapanen, he's a guy. Now, we could make an entire video about Kapanen and the way that his career has gone, but I also wanted to talk about a few other things too. Now, JFresh, you know who JFresh is. He's the guy on Twitter who posts all the player cards that talks about how good players are, and some people like to think of these player cards as the be-all and end-all, which I personally disagree with, but I do respect all the work that JFresh does. There's so much introspection done with a lot of these players here. The reason I'm bringing up JFresh is because when he posted this John Marino player card yesterday, talking about how he's got a 78 projected wins above replacement metric and all that stuff, a lot of the replies were, hey, he's going to look nice beside Quinn Hughes. Vancouver. Oh, future Canuck. All this stuff. And like, this prompted JFresh to bring up John Marino in a separate tweet that sort of went kind of viral. Where did Canucks fans get the idea that they're getting John Marino? Look, Marino for Garland might make sense in a universe where Pittsburgh's best signed right-handed defensemen aren't Chad Ruhwedel and some guy named Joshua Maniscalco, but we do not live in that universe. And so Canucks fans going out there suggesting, okay, if we trade Besser, we got to get a right-handed defenseman back. We got to get a guy who can step in here, play with Quinn Hughes long-term, yada, yada, yada. And John Marino happens to be that guy because Pittsburgh apparently wants Besser. Look, it would make sense in a vacuum, like, okay, value for value. Brock Boeser is 25 years old. John Marino is 24. Actually, yeah, Besser just recently turned 25, so belated happy birthday to him. But both these guys are pretty valuable at their respective positions. Besser, you could argue, has a lot more of a ceiling that he hasn't tapped yet, therefore giving him a little bit more value. John Marino, though, right-handed guy, super smooth. He's very smart with the puck. Like, he rarely makes mistakes. You watch this guy in the pressure in his own zone. He's so good at relieving pressure and sending it up ice and giving the forwards time to break out. Marino is an absolute gem. But the depth of the Pittsburgh Penguins on the right side is so weak that I couldn't realistically see them giving him up in a Brock Boeser trade because Besser, unfortunately, is not a defenseman and he doesn't help them in that respect. But of course, that's looking at it from the big picture. If you're looking at it in a vacuum, it would make sense. Marino for Besser, whatever. Maybe Kapanen plus for Besser. My question to you is this. If Brock Boeser does get traded to Pittsburgh, because that apparently is one of the teams that are hot on the trails as of the newest trade rumor scoop from Dhaliwal and Frank Seravalli, what would you want from Pittsburgh? There are not too many prospects that I think are of significant value in that system, so it's a little difficult to try to pinpoint, okay, which young guys would you want to acquire? There are some younger players on the team, of course, like the Kapanen. He was drafted 2014, so he's a year older than Brock Boeser. You also have yourselves, of course, that John Marino, too, 24 years old. Of course, there are the draft picks, and of course, there is Samuel Poulin, because he's like one of the only guys there that I think is valuable enough to even bring up. I guess him and Nathan Legare could be considered as well. I would have said Kalen Addison, but that guy got traded to Minnesota in the Jason Zucker trade, so unfortunately, he is not a trade target piece that we can have in this conversation anymore. But Canucks fans, let me know in the comments all your thoughts about the Pittsburgh Penguins and what a Brock Boeser trade would inspire you to desire. Is it that John Marino? Is it that Kapanen? Those are two names. There are a lot more names on the Penguins, so you can go ahead and let me know in the comments all your thoughts. If you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, would you actually want to make a trade for Brock Boeser? And considering the two ideas we've already highlighted as potential returns, do you like the sound of a Kapanen Plus package, or do you like the sound of a John Marino package as well? I could totally understand why you'd say no to one of them and yes to the other, but let me know in the comments on your thoughts regardless. I hope you enjoyed this Trolls 99, and bye.